Welcome to Detoxicity. This is a podcast in which I try to change the narrative around masculinity a little bit and allow some progressive voices and some interesting voices, diverse voices to come into the picture. My name is Mike Joseph. I host and produce this show, and I thank you very, very much for listening and for supporting from the bottom of my heart. It means a lot. Now, if you enjoy this podcast, I hope that you are subscribing to it. If you aren't, please press the subscribe button on wherever it is you're listening to it, and that way you'll get episodes on demand when they come, which is usually on Wednesday mornings. I also certainly ask that you spread the word. Please rate the podcast on whatever platform you're using to listen. Make sure you leave a comment if you have something nice to say, or if you have something constructive to say. It doesn't all have to be nice. And by all means, tell your friends, tell anyone who you think might get some creative juice or inspirational juice, or just would you'd like to listen to this, please spread the word however you can. I am on social media. If you would like to follow me, I am on Instagram at DetoxPod Guy. My Twitter is on hiatus for a little bit. It will come back, but it is Tis Mike Joseph. Feel free to follow me on either of those platforms. There is also facebook.com/detoxicity. And if you have a comment, you can email me, detoxpod@gmail.com. I am always on the lookout for new guests. So if you know somebody who you think has an interesting story to tell or something to add to the overall conversation around detoxifying masculinity, please reach out to me via any of those platforms. And certainly if you yourself would like to be a part of this podcast, please reach out. Let me know. Once again, I thank you for listening. Hey y'all, remember episode 85 where I recorded live in Mexico at the Desire Resort? Well, a lot of people who are on that trip with me have interesting journeys to talk about, and they're actually pretty happy to share those journeys via the Detoxicity podcast. So over the next couple of weeks and months, in between our regular podcasts, I'll be interspersing stories that have been told by people that I met on the Desire trip, and I hope you enjoy them as much as you enjoy all of the other stories that you hear here on Detoxicity. First up is my man Brandon James. Brandon grew up in rural Indiana with all of the conservatism that a rural Indiana upbringing might imply. He might actually be the first person I have ever met that is from Indiana. So a lot of what he said is, I guess, new to me in practice, as in knowing somebody who went through what he went through, but not new to me just by sort of knowing about the world and how conservative Midwestern upbringings can be. Anyway, there's always been a pull in Brandon's mind saying that he wanted a different life from the life that was set out for him initially. So he moved out to California. He's putting together that different life. Our conversation charts his personal evolution from being basically a choir boy in this rural Midwestern upbringing to going to college and learning a bit more about the world, to then kind of just expanding his outlook further out from there. We cover extroversion, we cover ADHD, we cover fraternity living, we cover communal structures, we cover a ton of stuff. This is a great interview. Brandon is a great dude. I hope you enjoy.
I'm Brandon. I am a born and raised Midwest, white, conservatively raised boy. I had the kind of stereotypical family, 3 kids. I have a brother and a sister, very religious upbringing, very conservative, indoctrinated in that scenario. Then went to college at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. Learned that not very good at college at that point in time in my life. I was not prepared. I don't think I had the skills or things taught to me growing up that would allow me to be successful. Took a year off, went on a festival binge. I love music festivals. Music is kind of my outlet to be myself and around the people
Nice.
who are more accepting, understanding of who I am. Then I got lucky enough to meet my current partner, who is a wonderful lady who has a PhD in sea turtle biology, and that was amazing to see her finish her PhD, and I was there to support her. And then I got lucky enough to get my golden ticket out of the Midwest and said goodbye to a lot of the things that I really needed to leave behind. And I lived in LA for 2 years, got my degree at Whittier University in business administration and management. And then I was really lucky enough to have her family and be able to move up to the Bay Area and really click into a much healthier community that was really something I've always craved or desired. And I'm into digital marketing right now. That's kind of my big thing. I love making websites. I'm really proud of some of the websites I've made. I love data and analytics, which Brandon 10 years ago would be like, we hate numbers in school. So that was really awesome for me to like finally click into what I enjoy and love. So now I am living in Petaluma, California, surrounded by wonderful people, and I'm really just enjoying life. And I had the opportunity to meet you, Mike, at Desire about a month ago on the dot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. About a month and a half almost at this
Oh
point.
yeah, man.
We're closing in on like 6 weeks, which is freaking crazy.
Yeah,
Feels like it was
yeah.
yesterday.
Time has flown. The holidays, just everything kicks into high gear.
Yeah, man. Oh, I have so many things that I'd like to ask you. So, to give you a little background, I had 3 years of a Midwest experience because my mom lives in Michigan. So, I know a little bit about the Midwest, but I don't really know what it's like to grow up there and have the first 17, 18, 19, whatever years of your life in that kind of environment. What was that like?
Growing up, it felt normal. I was just like, oh, this is what life is like. And so it was very religious heavy. Every Sunday, you go to church, you get lunch with your family after church. I was lucky enough to live in a college town with a world renowned university, Purdue University. I lived in that town. And so
Okay.
having the melting pot of students from all around the world really helped diversify my experience. But I didn't get that experience until I started going to Purdue. And so it was very, very white heavy, conservative heavy. Toxic masculinity was running rampant, which is one of the reasons where I was like, screw it. I really want to be on this podcast, even though I'm like insanely nervous. But it was almost very cultish growing up. So you have a lot of, you do this way. If you don't, you get yelled at, you get ostracized, you can't be a part of the community. I remember in high school being like 16 or 17, being like, I don't want to go to church anymore. Why am I going? I don't want to go. And it would be massive fights with my family, and everyone would be confused why I didn't want to go to church. And I'd be like, I just don't believe in these things. I don't like how I'm forced to go. If this is a lifestyle, usually lifestyles you choose to be involved in. So being vegan, you choose that lifestyle. Personally,
Right.
I'm polyamorous. This lifestyle I enjoy. It's what I like to do, and it what gives me fulfillment. And so being forced to go to church, I was like, why? This isn't a lifestyle I want to do. I'm not happy here. And there's a lot of brainwashing where they're like, oh, this is the right thing. It's like you get praise for things you don't want to do. I was convinced to give a sermon
Okay.
I was a sophomore in high school, and I gave a sermon about love and how it's represented in the Bible. And it's still on the internet. Please, listeners, do not go find that sermon. It is not worth listening to. But I did that, and everyone in the community was so proud of me. And for me, it felt very empty, very fake, very like coerced. And I was like, oh, this is what people want me to do. I'll get praise. This will be awesome. But it ended up being a very empty experience for me, and something that like I'm insanely embarrassed about at this point. And so, yeah, like just the conservatism. There's a lot of country folk. The town of West Lafayette on the outskirts around is very farming heavy. And people don't want to learn new things. A lot of my family questions science. They're against a BLM. They were shocked when gay marriage was passed. It's night and day versus being in the West Coast now. And I was really lucky enough to find the right friends at Purdue who are like my lifelong friends who understand me, they get me. And I bartended at a brewery, and I would have some of my parents' friends who'd come in and they follow me on Facebook, and so they'd see me at music festivals, and I would be wearing ridiculous outfits. I would dress as a woman, and they would like be giving me crap, and I'll be like, I was happy here. What are you getting out of this? You're just being mean, or yeah, it was like those snide comments. And so it's just like that environment where they're not asking you questions or open or understanding. They're more like it's our way or the highway, which
What
is
kind of stuff would they say?
like, oh, you go to these weird music things and you're dressed as a girl. Why'd you do that? Or like I've had them be like, oh, like are you like gay? First of all, how I dress does not define my sexuality at
Not at
all,
all.
at all. That was really eye opening to me. Or even friends who'd be like, Why are you dressed like that? Why would you go do that? Oh, you're at a music festival. How many drugs did you take? Their knowledge is from Hollywood or from what their parents tell them or what their parents make side comments about other people who acted like me or dressed like me. And so
Sure.
it was projecting onto me, which was really, really interesting to experience. And at the time was really hard. And back then I may have felt a little bit like shame on myself or felt weird, but now I'm much more confident as an adult. But growing up and being kind of like I used to be called a Fruit Loop.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And so looking back, I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I left that community. Because they're not the people I want to
I
be
get
around.
it. I get it. Were they calling you a Fruit Loop because they see pictures of you online dressed a certain way, or was it a way that you
Or
acted, or a
the way I
thing that you
acted,
did?
it was both. It was the photos online. I'm a very extroverted person. I'm very talkative. I'm very goofy. I love to joke around and mess around. That's where I have the most fun and feel myself. And so they're like, why aren't you being the stoic, hard headed guy who's going to make money for their family? I was the opposite of what they're normally seeing. And so in that kind of culture, I stood out like a sore thumb. And so they were like, he's different. I'm going to comment on that. And you're like, don't comment.
What I respect is that people get shit on a lot for being different in those kind of environments, and some people freak out so much when they get criticized that they reform. Right? They're like, it's just safer for me to be to play this role and act this certain way because that's the way everybody acts. And you were confident enough to say, I'm going to do my own thing and go my own way. Where did you get that confidence?
Wow, that's a really, really good question. I'm actually not 100% sure, but yeah, my response wasn't conforming. My response was doubling down. And so it almost became like, it's probably not a healthy response to be like, how much can I piss these people off? How much can I bother them by who I want to be? So maybe sometimes I would act more extravagant than I usually would just to bother people or maybe to change their minds. I would probably say it came from, ironically, my youth group leader in church. He was an amazing person and he was very much like me, where he was goofy, he had fun, he could act like himself. It wasn't feminine, but it wasn't masculine. He would show emotions and he would really connect with me. I looked up to him as a role model and he's a wonderful human. His name's Ryan, and he really taught me a lot of life lessons about things. He kind of was that role model I wanted to be. I was like, wait, he doesn't care. He's part of the church, which is probably one of the reasons I stayed in the church too long. I was even further on the spectrum than he was, but he gave me the comments to be like, oh, this is who I am. This is what I want to be. I can be goofy and fun and have that confidence and not care what others think because I'm myself and I'm happiest that way. And I definitely would have a lot of people who could have been my friends who were instantly turned off by me and how I acted. But they weren't going to be my friends anyway unless I changed who I was. And that doesn't sound like a fulfilling friendship or relationship.
No, not at all. I wonder if the people that criticize you, and this is me being basic psychology one on one guy here, if the people that are jealous of you or the people that see, I just threw my hand out right there. If the people that criticize you are criticizing you because they're actually critical of the things that you're doing, or because they're jealous that you're living an authentic life.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot over the years where I'm like, okay, are they jealous and projecting their jealousy onto me because they don't know how to find what I have? Or is it because of the conforming to their culture and they don't want to be ostracized? I don't have anyone in the church that I'm friends with from Indiana or no, besides obviously like my parents and family. And Becky, my youth group leaders, they were the only ones who I was like, these are awesome people and I respect their decision in religion, but I know I can come to them for anything and they're going to be there to support me and help me. And so it's interesting to think about it in that light where I actually truly think it's jealousy or yeah, misunderstanding where they want that, but they're not like me, but they don't know how to find that themselves or be authentically themselves. And so I would be the person at the party where I would still stick out like a sore thumb. I'm just acting goofy and having fun and messing around. And it's very interesting to see people be like, "Who's this guy? Why is he being so weird?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just having fun. Am I bothering you? I'm not interrupting your life or disrupting your party experience or whatever gathering experience it is."
What's so weird about being an extrovert? Everybody's got to have a life at the party or multiple lives at the party, right? Like every event has to have somebody that's a little bit more outgoing to balance out the people who are not a little more
Yeah,
outgoing.
and I think extroverts and introverts both play a really important role in social dynamics and relationship forming. Because as an extrovert, I can find a way to involve an introvert and be like, "Hey, would you like to go do this with me? Or would you like to dance? Or whatever it is, like play this game." And I don't think I'm pushy or in their face or over the top where it pushes the introvert more into their shell. I'm usually the person as an extrovert where I sit down calmly next to someone. I'm like, "Hey, you seem kind of quiet. How's your night going?" And then I start to ramp up the energy as they open up. And then it's kind of like energy feedback. This person's being really nice about this. We're having good conversations. We're starting to laugh. We're having fun. And then it builds upon that. And then introverts are really nice also for me as an extrovert where I get social burnout. Where like today is not my day to be an extrovert, and the introverts will be right there chilling on the couch, sit down next to them, and have a genuine conversation without having to go crazy or make a memorable, crazy, wild experience of the night.
How did you become intuitive? It seems that you in social situations are attuned to whatever to whatever the vibe of the room is. Where did you get that intuition? Because a lot of people can't read a room.
Yeah, I think mine would be from a sort of trauma. I have ADHD, and so I was the chatty kid, the all over the place kid. And so having people telling me to stop constantly or being ostracized and losing friends or having teachers like write me up and having that experience where now I am absolutely hyper aware of the environment I'm in and how everyone feels in a scenario. And I had an experience at Desire where I looked over and I saw, oh, his first name's only Keely. She wasn't having a good time. I could tell she was stressed. She was overwhelmed. And it was nights at the end of the week. I walked over and I was like,
Hmm.
"Hey, you want to like go get some air?" And she was instantly like, "Yes, let's go get some air." And so I think it's mostly because of how much I was shut down growing up as a child and kind of put into a box or being like, "You need to sit down, shut up, you're distracting the class, you're being a disruptive person." That now I'm hyper aware of being disruptive or I'm hyper aware of how other people are feeling where I'm like, "Oh, am I being too much? Am I being over the top? Am I being too quiet? Are they okay?" And I just want to take care of people, and I'm really interested in making sure that everyone's having a good time at a party. So if I throw a party and someone's quiet or anything, I'm just very hyper aware of what's going on. Like, how can I help their situation be better? Because I understand that it's not fun being in a scenario that you're not totally enjoying or you don't want to be there, but there's something that could help you enjoy your time there.
Sure. I got to ask to switch gears a little bit. Coming from Indiana, and again, I don't know much about Indiana. I don't know much about the Midwest other than my 3 year Michigan experiment. All I know about Indiana is like Larry Bird and Michael Jackson, pretty
Yep,
much.
pretty much.
What was it like to then like hit college? And I'm assuming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that all of a sudden it was like, oh, brown people, like queer people, gay people, people from different countries and different backgrounds and that kind of thing. What kind of culture shock
Massive.
was that for you?
Quite astronomical. My high school was the high school right next to the university, so we had kids who were foreign because they had parents who were professors at the university, and so we were the local high
Okay.
school, and that gave me like a little taste. But in high school, those kids were very much the outsiders, and unfortunately, the kids of color were only appreciated if it was athletics. And so the other ones, like the Asian stereotype, which was really unfortunate. Like, oh, these are the nerdy kids. These kids don't have social lives. They only want to study and learn. And the Latinos were known as the drug dealer kids, and even though they most of them weren't, it was just this weird stereotype. In the queer, obviously a lot of these kids didn't come out in high school, but they came out
Sure.
later, but they were known as like the weird theater kids. And so getting into college, I was like, oh, this is normal. Why was anyone making fun of these people? I felt horrible. I felt insane guilt because I would join in on these other kids trying to be popular or be accepted, because with ADHD, I always felt like an outsider. And so I was doing a lot of conforming to social norms to fit in so that I could have friends in that scenario. And so Purdue was really eye opening to be like, oh, wow, these people are all accepted. They all have their skills. They're all really important. I was part of an all color intramural football team. And I was like, this is the shit. This is awesome. How the heck did I come from a high school or community that acted completely opposite to how I would act around these people? And so that was huge. And then also at Purdue, pivoting off of that, I learned how much I didn't like fraternities and that male oriented toxicity, which obviously rolls into toxic masculinity at fraternities, where I was
Yeah.
like, wow, these are not the communities I want to be in. And it
Did
was
you have experiences in a frat setting? Specific experiences, specific experiences that were like, holy shit, this is not my jam at all.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say I rushed a fraternity. My best friend was in it, and he's a wonderful human, Bobby. He's just awesome, and he wasn't conforming. He just wanted networking, and it was a good way to make friends. And he pulled out the good people from that fraternity that are really awesome people. But there's a lot of, it's like at parties where guys would point at this girl like, "Oh, she's the slut," or "Oh, she slept around this entire fraternity," and I'm like, you have slept around with a lot of women also, so I'm
Right.
confused about your point, or why do you care? That environment was very a very massive turnoff. And I did try and rush because my friend Bobby was in it, and I was like, oh, this is a good idea. And I dropped it like 2 months in. I was like, I can't do this. This is cultish. This feels like going back to the Christian church. Like I'm
Mm,
out. I'm really glad I got my experience in religion because it clicked in my brain. I was like, wait, I am going back to what I hated.
that's an interesting parallel that you draw there. I know jack shit. I know less about fraternities than I do about Indiana. So this is all kind of interesting topics for me. But it does seem like people, when they want to belong somewhere, it's very easy for them to fall into what some would consider cult like behavior.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because that's like me in high school where I tried to be part of cliques. I would have behavior that was only that behavior because I wanted to fit in, because I could have friends and that felt
Right,
warm and comfortable in a community. But you're not acting in your own best interest or what you actually believe in. You're that desperate to network or have friends or whatever you want to do that you lose sight of a lot of values and your own personality. And so I think that's like a fraternity or church. People are just desperate for community and feeling belonging. So they're willing to compromise when you should not compromise on those level of ethical or moral decisions.
right. So as you progress, you're in college, and then at some point you head out to LA, which I would assume is culture shock times 100, because now you're not just in a college environment within the state that you were born and raised in, but you're on the other side of the country in an environment where, as you know, you're pretty white, Brandon.
Oh,
Like,
I am pasty. I burn thinking about the sun.
yeah, I've seen this. So then to go out to LA where you are culturally a minority,
100%.
and there are all these different types of people around you, that had to have been an adjustment as well.
Yeah, that was a massive shock. I ended up in Whittier, California, which is a suburb of LA. So I was about 19 miles from downtown LA. It was very Latino heavy. And so speaking Spanish was a massive advantage. And getting there, I was like, oh, wow. And like my one regret in LA is not learning Spanish. I should have learned Spanish. I know it's not too late, but in that environment with ADHD, I would like to put things off or procrastinate. It's a valuable skill to have. And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, the region of LA we were in was very much pro Trump as Latinos. And that was a culture shock to me where I was like, sweet, I'm leaving Indiana. Oh, oh no, this is weird. Being around another ethnicity who acts like the white people in Indiana was confusing. And I would probably put it up to propaganda and how politics play into roles and how they're talked to. And one of the big things that I recognized was that these people were all likely citizens. And so they thought other people who were immigrants had to earn their way, and you couldn't just be an illegal immigrant and cross the border. I feel like they felt like they had this level of right to their citizenship, that
Superiority.
superiority, yeah, superiority thing. It was very shocking to see. But I understand, like, it's the very low income area of LA. They didn't have the resources or education that a lot of other people would probably have. And it was disheartening, but I was very much understanding of the environment and culture and variables in play that caused it. But I was lucky enough to go to Whittier College in Whittier, which was a very inclusive, mental health forward, very mental health forward college that was
And
it was very really a stark contrast to Purdue, which is cutthroat, wannabe Ivy League state school, where they're looking
huh.
for any reason to fail you. And that was one of the reasons I took a year off and went to music festivals, because that was my escape, and Purdue wasn't giving me the escape I needed because of how strict and cutthroat and not understanding of mental health and what I needed. And professors would be like, "Oh, you just need to figure it out, try harder." And that was really frustrating at Purdue. And then going to Whittier, where they're like, "Oh no, we get it." And I would turn in all my assignments by the end of the semester. It's just sometimes I need a little bit more time, or I'm stressed out, or I'm not doing well right now. And they were the kind of college where they're like, "Oh no, I'll give you an extra 3 days." That's huge. At Purdue, they'd be like, "You get a 0."
Mm,
Yeah, and so it's like that kind of like kind of situation where I'm like, wow, these people like really genuinely care about their students.
right. I. It's funny because I was going to ask you what you meant by mental health forward, and then you explained it. As someone who is also diagnosed with ADHD, I'm curious what that looks like for you, and how you manage it or attempt to manage it.
Exercise and going to the gym is part of my medication. I have to burn off the energy, or I'll pace around the house until I can talk my brain into doing a task, which is really frustrating. A lot of my symptoms are wildly life debilitating, where I'll just pace around the house, or I physically cannot get my brain to do what I want it to do. It's like having someone at the kitchen table screaming at my brain to do something, and my brain's like, nah, I'm not doing that.
Huh.
And it gets to the point where I also get really avoidant, where I'll miss a deadline, and I get anxiety about reaching back out or explaining myself, or I feel guilty where I just avoid it. To the point where I had a credit card that I defaulted on, and eventually, like 2 years later, paid off the entire balance, where I was just like, I out of sight, out of mind. My brain didn't wanna. It was too stressful. It was massively avoidant. But yeah, like the gym, I do medication, I do stimulants. I don't like them a lot because I kind of like my emotional dysregulation. I like showing emotions. I like making it clear. Sometimes they're overblown or not appropriate for the situation. But I really am someone who's like, I need to show my emotions, even if sometimes they're irrational. I think it's important to show them, just so someone can understand where you're coming from or what's wrong, even if they wouldn't react in the same way. And I try to eat a healthy diet. I've done therapy. Therapy is like dating, which is really frustrating. And so since I've as I had a long time, I think 3 or 4 years therapist in Indiana that really helped me through a lot of my childhood and the toxic masculinity of my dad not understanding ADHD and being like, try harder, just figure it out. Why can't you do this? And then the therapy really helped me understand, like, oh, like I just have this issue. I need medication. I need coping mechanisms. I understand. And so that was really helpful. And then I had therapy at the school for probably about 6 months, and it helped quite a bit just to become part of the community, moving there, having someone to talk to about like making friends. Like as an adult, making friends, I think, is significantly harder.
Hard,
It's
man.
so hard because everyone's got their own lives.
And you're pretty young. Wait till you get to my age, and it's like, holy fuck, man.
Like, even my age at 26, most of the people from Indiana have kids and lives and jobs, and
Right,
they don't have time to make friends. They don't. Their plate's
right.
full. And then moving up to Petaluma, I'm still in search of a therapist, and like I kind of look at therapy as like I have this problem. I would like help to solve this problem, and then I'm like, it's like I finished my treatment plan, like chemotherapy. I got my therapy. They solved my problem. I can move on. And so, yeah, like that's really how I kind of cope with ADHD. I've also done psychedelics have really helped me understand myself. I think psychedelics in my early 20s was really eye opening to how I can look at myself in a better way. Like, oh, I have positives. I'm super extroverted. I love talking to people. I love meeting new people. I love hearing stories. Like a desire, I was all over the place. I met so many people, got
You
so many
were. I
numbers.
mean, so was I.
Yeah. But like, yeah, exactly. Like, that's like fun. And so accepting that you have these flaws, but they're okay. That's who you are. And acceptance was really huge for me through psychedelics was a really big part.
That's become an interesting topic of conversation that I've been hearing about recently, where people are advocating for psychedelics as a therapeutic product. And I have only done psychedelics once in my life, had for the most part a really good experience, and am considering going that route again.
What psychedelic did you take?
I did LSD, I dropped acid.
Oh, nice. I would highly recommend shrooms. Shrooms is the one that felt the most connective internally. It felt more emotional and looking inward on myself, and it was very helpful. It's obviously not a cure all. I don't advocate it as a cure all. I just think it's something
Sure.
that people should try in a controlled environment, whether it's with a therapist, because now you can go find therapists who do psychedelic therapy, or you can sit around with your best friends and you tell your best friend who's a tripster, like, these are my goals for this trip, this is what I want to talk about, this is what I want to analyze, can you make sure I don't jump out a window or go
Right.
crazy or do anything erratic. And most of the time no one ever does anything erratic, but it's you need to have a safety net.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. So, jumping to sort of the music festival part of it was, I mean, there are not any music festivals in Indiana, I'm assuming.
You can maybe count one, but it's not a music festival.
Okay.
It's not something I've gone to a few. It's called Snake Pit. It's at the Indy 500, and so
Oh,
it's a
wow.
very frat white boy kind of festival, and it's only one day, and it's not the environment I would ever seek out again. Now that I'm out of Indiana, it was something that I'm like, oh sweet, something to do in May. My festivals are more in the lines of I want to be in the woods with my friends around awesome, cool people. Like Desire, I think I told a few people this were like, wow, these are the people I would meet at a music festival. Insanely open minded, from all walks of life, all colors of skin, all mental health issues, all coming together and loving each other and being understanding. And so like that was really what drew me away. And that's why I kind of left Purdue where I was like, wow, I'm not happy around these people. These aren't the people I want to be around. And then I spent a year, it would have been 2016. I went to 15 music festivals across the country.
Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, from Florida all the way up to New York City, I went to Electric Zoo. You've probably heard Electric Zoo.
Uh huh.
Yep. And so yeah, I just kind of took a year off and I was like, I want to go kind of find myself. And music is something that's always helped me focus with ADHD. I guess that'd be another treatment I would call as music is something that really like kind of quiets my brain to focus on one thing at a
Yeah,
time.
man.
And so music festivals was like my massive escape. I actually worked at a vendor called Hippie Dips and I made sandwiches so I could go for free. I couldn't afford this. And so
I was going to
I
ask,
was
like,
on the
how the hell
circuit.
do you
I
afford
was
15 festivals in a year?
no, I
That's thousands of
yes,
dollars.
yeah, I was on the circuit and I was just making sandwiches and being around really awesome people. And I've made some amazing friends through that. That was really like the thing where I'm like, okay, this is the people I want to be around. And like
Do
that
you
was
not get do you not get crowd anxiety? I mean, Desire was 220 people, not including the staff. The average festival, you multiply that by
like
10.
yeah, hundredfold almost. Yes, I get crowd anxiety. Early on, I might have been a little bit too overeager and just was like, I want to ride the rail. I want the bass to rumble my body. But now I'm more of someone who wants to chill, medium to back, and really get to know people. And so, like the first few music festivals I went to, I didn't really get to meet a lot of people because you can't talk, you can't hear anything. You're like
Right.
screaming. You're doing sign language. You had to learn sign language on the fly. And so I'm the person who's in the back, just chilling, vibing, enjoying my time, loving the music. But yeah, crowd anxiety I definitely get, especially around people I don't know. And so I always show up with like a group of 10 to 20 people, and I don't know them really well. I trust them, and it feels like a very safe space within the music festival environment.
Wow. I'm trying to picture myself in that similar sort of space, and I just feel like I would be super overstimulated.
That's yeah, that's the one thing is I think I got overstimulated a lot at Desire more than I did at music festivals. It's all shiny and bright and cool, fun stimulus. But at Desire was a lot of workshops and learning new things.
Hmm. You weren't comfortable just observing?
It was a weird thing. Is like I call myself like an energy feeder where like I bounce back off of people, and so like that energy in the room made my brain think I wanted to do that, but I just enjoyed their happiness in it. It was almost like where I was defaulting to the point where I felt like I had to act in a way that I wouldn't normally act, just because I had to like almost it was almost like the fitting in. And my brain
Hmm.
was like, "Hey, you need to fit in." I couldn't sit on the sidelines. I had to join because everyone else was joining in. And it's like that's one of the things where like I get overstimulated. My brain either I need to leave, but I can't leave an all inclusive. I can't go anywhere.
Do you feel that often, like the need to fit in to
Oh,
situations? Do you still
100%. I
feel
still
that?
that trauma follows me forever. Where like I have a real problem almost not like being myself, but I will kind of like crank up who I already am to fit in or be like, "Oh, sweet, you're totally down to like make out with someone you just met in this pool." No, I'm not. I would never ever freaking do that in normal life. Ever. I would never see someone at a party and be like, "Oh, I need to make out with them." And so like Desire, I think my brain was like, we're at a sex resort vacation that's poly and kink like yeah, kink LGBTQ plus open. And so my brain was defaulting to actions or pushing me towards actions that if I would never ever normally take. But like I think I learned a ton from Desire and I'm really happy about it, but I also know how I act in those scenarios where I'm like, okay, I'm all right not being in those environments because I don't really like how I act because I feel like an outcast. My brain is like, don't be the outcast. Join in, join in, join in,
Right.
join in. But it's okay to be an outcast. It's okay to sit on the sidelines
It totally is.
and hang out with people and talk to people. And
Yeah.
so like
I
yeah,
feel like for me there were so many options for things to do. Like
that
I didn't feel like I had to be included in everything, but I also overanalyzed to the point where I was like, "Oh my god, there are so many places I could be right now. Maybe I just don't want to be anywhere."
yeah, that I felt that like at the end of the week I got burnout where I'm like trying to go to all the things I wanted to go to and like overextending myself. Like I had FOMO. Like how can I get the most enjoyment out of this even though I would have gotten the same enjoyment by just relaxing or enjoying myself or taking time off. It was still really frustrating to be burned out when I could have just paced myself or I felt guilt about doing things I wouldn't normally do because my brain was pushing myself. But I learned an absolute massive amount myself. And now I know in those environments, okay, you have to prepare yourself. And I can have a partner or friends around me who'll be like, hey, you don't need to go do this. Don't go do this. You don't need to.
And that's the whole thing. I feel like this experience for me as well was a learning experience that prepared me for the next time I do something like this. So I sort of know what to do versus what not to do, or what I want to try versus what I don't want to try, where I need to be versus where I don't need to be, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, exactly. I think my brain was overstimulated by the amount of options. And now that I've gone, I'm like, oh, okay, sweet. I know all the options because I forced myself through all of the options. And
Yeah,
so now I can pick and choose or focus on one or change the kind of prioritization I go about things versus like prioritizing events or certain things at the resort. I can spend an afternoon meeting people or socializing or on the beach relaxing. I think
yeah.
I spent so little amount of time relaxing at Desire. Like actually just laying down with a book. Spent too little amount of time doing that and knowing that I'm like, okay, next time I'm gonna sit my ass down and just read and enjoy the afternoon. Also, I am from the Midwest, so I do not have any experience with kink or any of this kind of thing. And so I was really adamant about learning as much as I could and seeing as much as I could just so I can know, okay, this is what I like, this is what I desire, this is what I don't like, this is not what I want to do, kind of thing. And so going back now, I'm like, I've already been in the workshops. I've already seen it all. I'm good.
You don't need to do it again.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
I also feel like that's the type of shit that evolves over time. Like the things that you enjoy, the person you are grows as you grow. It should change as you get older and get more experience in that kind of thing. So I don't necessarily know that there's the need to soak everything in at once. or even make like a hard decision on whether this is for me versus this is not for me, because what could be for Brandon at 26 might not be for Brandon at 36 or 46. So just got to kind of take the experience in and not make any like hard line
Yeah, yeah,
decisions.
enjoy it and understand that you grow and change. And now I go to maybe one or two music festivals a year. I used to be going to like 5 or 6, and the one year I went crazy, but now I know it's something I can go to escape to and have fun with, but it's not something I need once a month or all the time kind of scenario where like you
Sure.
grow to know how much of a good thing you need. Because you can have too much of a good thing and it becomes destructive.
100%. 100%. So I gotta admit, we were on the resort, and I remember talking to somebody, and you were not the only Brandon there. So we had to differentiate you from the other Brandon. I was like, oh, the bro dude.
Oh man, you called me a
And
bro? Come on, mate. Look, if you've only seen my look, I am very much look like your stereotypical bro. I look like a frat star. If someone like, oh, he's
and
got
I
the nice
think
beard, the nice hair.
and I think that was part of it. Like, you're blonde, you obviously go to the gym, you still kind of have that aesthetic going
Yes.
for you. Now, there was one night we were out at the bar, like kind of hanging out, and I got to talk to you and realized that you were definitely a lot more complex and thoughtful than the average bro. Do you feel like, and I think broness, quote unquote, is definitely tied into masculinity
Yep.
to an extent. Do you feel like you still kind of carry that? You still got some Indiana in you, you know what I'm saying? And it's not a bad.
Yeah, I think I do. I definitely have this thing where like I need to go to the gym. I know it's something that can help me with ADHD, but I also go because I want to look good. I want to, and like looking good makes me feel good, and having nice hair, having nice jawline, watching my weight. And so, yeah, that kind of stuff like follows me. And I guess I don't like to admit it all the time. Where like, oh, yeah, I'm going to the gym so I can look good for people around me, or I can show off. It's almost like a low key arrogance where I'm like, oh, yeah, I look good. And I think it's something that's from the Midwest where I was around a lot of people who were like that, and they got all the girls, they got all the attention. And so it's something I think I was jealous of or seeked out. And I was like the 6'2", really, really skinny kid in high school as a freshman and sophomore. And if you see photos, you'd be like, wow, this kid needs to eat food. And so that was a big part of it where people used to think I was too skinny and it was like gross. And so then I was like, okay, I need to bulk up. I need to look cut. And so I think I do definitely maybe carry that energy from afar. But I think a lot of people like you and yourself understand when I start talking, I'm like, oh, wow, this is a very like emotional and thoughtful person who is not going to talk about sports, is not going to talk about what a normal bro would talk about.
Right. Which is funny because I love sports, and I'm certainly capable of talking about it. But if you put us in a room together and are like, who's gonna talk your ear off about basketball for 30 minutes? Right. Right. It's funny. It's and I feel like you and I probably, although we have very different upbringings, both grew up with very strict ideas of what a man was versus what a man is not. And I always credit my queerness with keeping me kind of on the right side of that, because I feel like if I was straight, I would have had so much more toxic masculinity to unlearn. Like, sort of struggling with my sexuality through my teens and my 20s gave me a little bit of an insight into what it was like to not be traditionally masculine in that sense. Where, like, how did the rules or the idea of masculinity that you grew up with, like, how have you handled challenging?
I challenged it because of my father and how much I wanted to not be like him. Growing up, I was very emotional, very open-minded, very understanding, and he was very like quick to anger, all about being tough, always saying just figure it out, try harder, work harder. Oh, this is your fault. And like that was like my really big pushing was I don't want to be like that. This is not cool. This is not fun. Embarrassingly enough, I was in ROTC at Purdue. I was gonna go in the military because I was brainwashed. Yeah, the magic. Yeah, like knowing me now, you'd be like, no way, dude. Yeah, like I was that ingrained where I was like, oh, to be a man and support my family, I gotta fight for my country. And I was just doing everything that toxic masculinity was telling me to do through my father and my grandparents. Like even like the
Is
toxic
it?
masculinity of my grandmother was like very weird how they would just be like very much pushing that agenda and that was okay and
But
like
the funny thing, two things, and not to cut you off, but two things I can gather from that that make a lot of sense. One is that conditioning will completely mess your head up, and it's real. The thing you need to sort of unlearn a lot of the stuff that you've been taught and develop your own mind, your own thought process. But the other thing, and I'm glad you brought up your grandmother, is that women can practice toxic masculinity too.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Once I learned about toxic masculinity, I'm like, wait, like my mother and even grandmother have participated in that and joined in or have been silent the silent voice in the room when they could have stood up for me or said something. And I grew up with a father who I've never seen him cry to this day. He told me to leave the room when his father died. Our dog got killed I was on the bus when my dog got ran over by the bus driver. And I came home to my dad who was no emotion at all. And so
Gee,
growing up, I was like, no, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to shun emotions. I don't need to be violent. I remember my coaches in football be like, why don't you be more aggressive? And I'm like, I don't like hitting people. So I was a wide receiver and I'd run fast. 'Cause I did not like being
you
hit.
make it work for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I ran track. I love track. I was really good. I went to nationals in the 400-meter dash, and I did not like violence. I quit wrestling early on. I there didn't seem the need for it. Like, why am I bashing my whole body against someone else? Like, it just and my dad be like, "Oh, you should like hit harder or weight lift harder," and I'm like, I don't. Why? Like, why do we have to be aggressive or angry to get what we want? It's a lot easier to have an open conversation with understanding and empathy than to have this dominance or aggression be your power.
That's amazing, an amazing conclusion to come to. And I think that ultimately that's what a lot of this podcast is about. And a lot of what we need to realize in order to just be healthy fucking people. Like I think that people who don't show, whether no matter what their gender is, you hold emotion in, you keep up the stoicism, you don't allow yourself to feel feelings, like that stuff is gonna eat you up inside.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people also look at power represents the ability to like man it's like it's mostly like a physical thing like I can manhandle you like I can threaten you with a weapon or something or it's like that kind of power when I think there's a lot more power in empathy and understanding and communication that I think a lot of toxic or people who practice toxic masculinity misunderstand. Like, you don't have to be this way. This might work in Indiana, but I don't think it's the healthiest or right way or good for anyone. You're just scaring people. You're manipulating people because, oh, this is a strong man versus a small girl, even though I think the small girl has more power in her way of communicating versus the strong buff guy who just thinks he needs to dominate people.
Right. You're manipulating people who don't know better. And I think once you get out of those environments into places where people have a little bit more experience dealing with different kinds of folks, then that whole act falls apart and people can see through the bullshit essentially.
Yeah, that's kinda what happened with my dad. I just saw through the bullshit. I was like, "This is bullshit." Like, he just has control over me financially and just through I need a home. And high school was where I kind of or, like, early in college is where I learned family isn't blood, it's the people who are there for you and understand you. Family's not
Amen
blood.
to that.
And that was really important for me to learn because my friend Bobby's parents have been amazing family to me. My friends have been amazing family to me. My partner's family has been a better family to me than my own. And so learning that and telling people that like, you have the power to find the family you deserve or the people you deserve. You don't have to be stuck with what you're born with because that's how society has always been.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I want to talk a little bit about how polyamory came into your life. Like, where did you even get wind of that being a thing?
Through my partner at Purdue, I met her when she had a boyfriend. She gave me her number in front of her boyfriend. And being a naive conservative white boy, I was like, "That's your boyfriend, right?" And she's like, "Yeah, so." And just slid me her number. And I was like, "Wow, this is crazy." Like the confidence she showed in what she was practicing, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And so that was my first foray into it. And over the years, I've read books about it, and Polysecure was a really good book to read. I also believe that no amount of books you could read could teach you what you need to know about poly. It's going out and doing it. You have to do it. You have to learn. You have to fail. And poly is a really long learning process because of how society is monogamous heavy, and
Right.
probably will be for a long time. Which monogamy has no place in the world because we don't need to reproduce anymore. We're over. We already have the population we need, and so monogamy has kind of, in my mind, lost its value. And I also like learned early on that people have infinite love to give, not infinite time. And so I think you do have the capacity to love other people and have meaningful connections outside of just one person. I am
Absolutely.
so close with some friends, I would almost call them a partner. It's not romantic. It's like it's intimate in our conversations. It's probably not romantic or sexual, but like, where do you draw the line? Like, I've also learned about the tiers of, oh, wow, the no homo thing growing up was really toxic. Because you have to bring it up. You can just be really close with your friends and really have those level of intimacy. And so she really opened my eyes to it. And Desire was probably the first time where I really got to see it up close and personal in such an intimate way and see it normalized. And that was my really big thing. A light switch went off. Because a lot of times I'd be like, I'm not having any luck with this. Because I would like start talking to a girl on a dating app, and the second I brought it up, she'd be like, "Oh, I'm out. That's weird," or
Sure.
"I'm too
Sure.
insecure. I'm too jealous." And I'm like, I could say that, but like I've also learned through poly that um, envy is much different than jealousy. That was really massive. Knowing that envy was, oh, I love that my partner's doing that. I really wish I could find that. Versus, oh, my partner's doing that. I can't let her do that because I don't get that. And so rather than setting like walls up or putting your partner in a box or limiting them, you're like, "Oh, that's awesome. I'm happy for them. Like that's something I want to go find and do."
You bring up an interesting point because I've had the same thought process before where I was like, man, this ain't working out for me. Maybe I'm not poly. But it's like me thinking, oh, dudes don't want to go out with me. Maybe I'm not queer anymore, which is silly because I am what I am, right? Whether you're being successful at navigating multiple relationships or you're batting zero, like you are what you are.
Yeah, and I've made like a ton of mistakes this year in poly where like I'm just learning. And I've had a partner who's been gracious enough to be understanding of that and being like, "Oh, like cuz she prescribes to the idea that some people are born poly like as an identity, almost like being queer or bi, where like that's just their MO, that's their mode of operation from the get-go. It's not like they decide to change their diet to veganism and like just enjoy that. Like, so I was like, oh, that's really interesting, and she's thrived in it. And I also think that women really do have an advantage because she's probably turned down like 50 or 60 guys, which also has really helped me notice that like, oh, I'm important, I'm special enough to be in the top 3 or whatever. I don't even look
Right.
at it like that. I'm just
Right.
special enough to make the cut. And so even like with not a lot of success on my end, knowing that she still thinks I'm worth dating or being with and choosing to come home to me is like massively reassuring. Even as I make mistakes in jealousy or being crazy or even a desire where I just like it was like stimulus overload and I was going bananas. And like yeah, and I did things that I regret and understand now that like, oh, I have to think about my actions before I do them and not let ADHD just be like stimulus, stimulus, stimulus and be all over the place and just bounce around whatever is going to give me that dopamine rush that my brain is craving at the moment.
It's all part of being human,
Yeah.
man. We all make mistakes. We all do stupid shit, and the power comes from being able to own up to it and having people in your life that will call you out when you do stupid shit and not being defensive about it, but saying, "Okay, I see where you're coming from. I made a mistake. I
Yeah,
apologize,
like I
and
understand. Yeah,
I'll do
I'll
better."
do better. I know now. I've learned, and like I got two partners from Desire, and she's really happy and supportive of me, like finally finding like partners and like really pursuing it. And it's been absolutely wonderful. Where there's a lot of times where I'm like, dang, maybe I have nothing to offer because I can't find another partner. But most of the people were just monogamous. My pot of people is very, very tiny, and the things have to click. They have to have the time. because, as you know, poly is a logistical nightmare.
Yes.
Making it all
There's
work.
a lot
Yeah.
of calendar
Yeah,
stuff.
so calendars and staying on top of it. And I'm horrible with calendars, which you might be also with ADHD. I am horrible. Forget about things. I forget about homework assignments. Like, how can I remember, like, to keep all this in track and all, and
Oh
remember to
yeah,
respond
man.
to people. And like, I've been a lot better about being upfront about my not failures, but who I am, and being like, hey, I might not respond for a week. I legitimately just forgot. I don't know why, because I do care about
Right.
you.
It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta ask. You were almost certainly the youngest person there. Did did that register with you at all, or
um,
did it
you
bother you? Did it make you feel away?
That's actually really interesting because someone in Discord, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I talked to her before and messaged her because I'm demisexual, and I was super worried about being young and demisexual. And
Now, explain demisexual for the folks that are not.
for the listeners, demisexual is where it's on the ace spectrum, and so it's kind of like sapiosexual, where you only want to have sex with people who give you intellectual enjoyment or knowledge. Mine is more the
Yes.
emotional side, and so I have to have an emotional connection to look at you as a sexual being. So a lot of times I can look at someone objectively being like, "Oh, that's a objectively beautiful person in our culture," because I know our culture, I grew up in it. But I'm not getting turned on or I'm not interested. And it's not until I can start to talk to them and start to get to know them and trust them and feel comfortable where I can have a sexual relationship with someone. And so growing up, I didn't know what I thought something was wrong with me. I was like, why do I have to wait like 2 to 3 months before it gets to that point? So I was like, is this normal? And all my friends were like, oh, my friend Bobby, he's going to hate me because I for sure lied to him. We had a list of people we had sex with, and he had a good list. And my list was a legitimate list. My list was just me performing acts on a woman, not actually. So, like, I would get drunk and she'd be like, oh, would you like to have penetrative sex? And I'm like, no, I'm not comfortable doing that. How can I help you? And so that's kind of what it was a lot of the college time, where I was just doing that because I didn't have the level of comfort. And I also got a lot of women angry at me who are like, oh, am I not hot enough? Do you not like me enough? Why won't you do this? And I'm like, I'm just not comfortable enough. And it's kind of nice to have that boundary, something you already do just because of who you are. And so it's helped me set up boundaries going forward, being like, I know when not to get in a situation like that. Like, oh no, she asked me to go home with her. I'm going to say no now before it gets into that situation where I'm uncomfortable or anxious or not feeling like I have that connection with that person yet to go through with what they may want to go through with.
That's super respectful, and believe me, you know this. You are not the first college student to lie
Oh, I know, I
about their
know. Yeah,
conquests.
I know.
It would be weirder if I had somebody on there like, "Oh yeah, it was 100% truthful."
Yeah, true. That'd be like, I'm like, all right, come on now. Uh,
Right, like somebody's bullshitting somebody in that situation.
but yeah, back to the age thing at Desire. It was very clear. It was nice having my partner's sister and fiance there. They were a year or 2 years older than me. They didn't participate as much as I was. It was definitely clear, but almost reassuring, because I have people be like, wait, you're here at 26? Like, I wish I could have been doing this at 26. Like, I didn't have that confidence or the balls, and I don't think I did have the balls, as my partner dragged me to it. But I ended up loving it there. And so I would talk to people at the bar in the night, and they're like, oh, wow, you're a really genuine, awesome person. A lot of people are like, oh, he's just the hot guy. Like, the bro, the sex for game. Let's see what I can get my count to by the end of the week kind of person. I'm like, oh, no, this guy isn't out here to do that. It's not my goal. Yeah. I was like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, you looked at me like a bro. I can't. Oh, Mike, fuck. I definitely give up that look, even though that's also another reason why I wear colorful, flamboyant colors, because I want to kind of bring down that look on me where I'm like, oh, he has kind of feminine style. Like
sure.
I have multicolored jeans where like I have a pair of teal jeans that are really bright blue. That's another reason I really love color, is because it can kind of show a more feminine, open, loving, happy side versus, oh, he's just a bro trying to get laid, like he's wearing a suit and tie. And so I really stray
Right.
away from the male normative colors and style as a way to be like, I know how I look. I can't change how I look. I do love the gym, but it's not who I am. I don't ever talk about the gym. I'm not like, how much do you bench press? It's never a competition to me. I'm never talking to girls. I'm never walking to a girl being like, I could bench press your body. I just want to look good and feel confident in my skin. And that's also why I can
Sure.
wear colorful clothing, because I feel confident in my skin. and I can.
Appreciate that confidence.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that like that
Yeah,
conversation
of
with
course.
you the third or second night was actually unbelievably awesome with you, and
It
you
was
were
just
wonderful.
thank you. It's really interesting to have preconceived notions and then have a conversation with somebody and have them, even somebody like me who considers themselves to be open-minded and accepting and all that stuff. You see people and you kind of get an idea in your head of what this person is probably like. And I'm a very big believer in, I think I would almost consider myself demisexual in a way because I I mean both sapiosexual and demisexual because emotional attachment is key and intellectual attachment is key. And those things make me want to bring somebody, it's not necessarily a sexual thing, but those things make me want to sort of wrap my proverbial arms around somebody and bring them into the fold. So it sort of went from I'm talking to this bro dude to like, oh, Brandon is cool, I really like this guy, I want to talk to him more. And I sought you out to have more conversations with you and get to know you better.
Yeah,
um
that's just funny because now when you say bro, I think of like how the one playmate looked like being a bro. Like I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah. And I really appreciate you even giving me that opportunity to talk to you and show
yeah.
you who I am because from a distance anyone can look like anything and everyone as a human has preconceived notions of who they are or what they might act like. And so it does take a certain kind of person to be like, "Oh, I'm willing to talk to them and hear their story or like what do they got to say? Is it worth me hearing?" kind of thing. And so I think that's important for
Right.
humans to have, even if we have these internal biases that we may not have control over. They just come up in our head.
I was like, oh, I'm gonna adopt this dude now.
Oh yeah.
I gotta ask. So this is the last question. If you were to put a fine point on what the next step in your personal evolution is, like, what do you think that is?
Oh, the next step. Ooh, I think I have a good one. I've learned that I really struggle with certain types of communication. So arguments, I can't get my thoughts straight. And so sometimes I have to walk away to process and think about it, then come back with a clear defined idea. And that's also why sometimes I'll leave arguments and then text the person later with my response. There's too much going on in my head with ADHD. I can't get it out correctly. I don't want to say something that I don't mean or comes off wrong. And so I think my next step in growth is really working on communicating with people like, hey, I need a minute to step back, cool off, get my thoughts straight, then re-engage. And so I think that's the next growth I'm really looking towards is really figuring out how to communicate to someone that I need time to figure out how to communicate back. It's
I was gonna say, I do you when you find yourself getting angrier, do you lose your filter? Do you just sort of
yes,
say,
everything,
is it just
everything,
like
dude,
ah?
everything just comes
Yeah,
out. The floodgates open, and it's chaos. And then I feel insane guilt and shame thinking about it later, being like, "Why did I say that? That's not who I am." It's almost like you're looking at a different person. And I think it's just emotional dysregulation, where once that emotion starts to build up, it is like throwing nitrous into a race car, and it's just through the roof. And you need time to like stop the ball from rolling, step back, reset the ball and re-engage because I just don't, yeah, the filter drops, it just gets overstimulated, everything's out of control. And that's like a lot where a lot of my mistakes even come in relationships to people where like confrontation I don't stray from, but I do struggle with knowing when to disengage and recollect myself so that I don't hurt someone or misrepresent
mm,
myself or say something that isn't what I actually believe or think or how I even feel. Because I may feel it in that moment, but it's not how I feel all the time or what I think all the time. It's just in the moment. And that really comes back to bite you in the ass and can really hurt relationships and really mess with how your life is going.
you are speaking my language, man.
I think it might be an ADHD thing. Also, with my dad and brother are quick to anger. It's like a trigger, and it goes off. There's 0 to 100. Mine is more 0 to 100 in sadness and crying. So when I get frustrated or upset, I go to sadness and just like grief and like I'm like really upset because I wouldn't allow myself to get angry like my father did. And so now I revert to not ever I don't allow myself to feel angry. So even if I get an argument, I will cry first or walk away because either one of them will start to get angry, so I walk away, or I cry and then I can't get my thoughts out because I'm crying. And so both are counterproductive to communicating. And so understanding how to balance that or communicate what you're feeling or what's going on, like, hey, I need to step away, or let me go scream at the clouds real quick, then I'll come back, clear my head. I've
Right
done that
on.
before, like with one of my exes, where like we were in an argument and I was like, I need a moment. I went out and just screamed. And it calmed me down because I need to let something out. I had something in me. I didn't know what it was, but it released a ton of energy that was disrupting my way of communicating. And it was really helpful. And so I think like my next big step in growth would be that.
Awesome. I loved hearing Brandon's story. And one thing that actually does resonate with me that might surprise you is needing to leave your surroundings in order to grow as a person. I think that is something that you could certainly say about a lot of people that have small and rural upbringings where everyone is kind of monochromatic. And in order to understand people who are different from you, you have to experience people who are different from you. And that necessitates you getting out of the space that you spend most of your time in, whether that is to go to college or to work or to pursue a creative pursuit or something like that. Just getting out of your standard, your comfort zone. I can relate that back to when I was growing up. Even though I grew up in New York City, I grew up in a very specific part of Brooklyn, which was not especially diverse and didn't offer a lot in terms of progressive thinking. So, in order for me to change my life, I had to get out of that environment. And I felt that same pull that Brandon felt to get out of his environment in Indiana. And I was like, I got to do something for myself. And once I did get out of there, it was liberating because all of these things that I had thought about people who were different than me, I mean, some were confirmed. And in some cases, in most cases, just my appreciation and respect and empathy grew by hundreds and thousands of points. So I don't know. What am I trying to say? Just get out of your comfort zone. I think it's really important to do that and surround yourself with people who maybe have different ways of thinking than you do, particularly if you've grown up in an environment where everybody thinks the same. You'll be surprised at what you learn and what you begin to appreciate and what you end up finding out about yourself. Thank you, Brandon, for doing the show. I really appreciate it. It was great to meet you in Mexico. I'm looking forward to our friendship. You can find Brandon on Instagram if you would like at Brandon underscore the underscore ginger underscore. Once again, that is Brandon underscore the underscore ginger underscore. Thanks for listening to the Detoxicity Podcast. My name is Mike Joseph. Once again, if you want to find me online, hit me up on Instagram at DetoxPod Guy. I'm on Twitter intermittently at TizMikeJoseph. You can go to Facebook.com/detoxicity. You can email me detoxpod@gmail.com. Love to hear constructive criticism, love to hear feedback. Would love if you are a potential guest or you know somebody who you think would be a potential guest, please by all means reach out to me. And remember, if you enjoy this podcast, subscribe, rate, comment, do all of the things necessary to push this podcast up in the podcast rankings and get this into as many ears as possible. Tell a friend, do whatever it is you need to do. And thank you once again for listening. I personally want to thank the following people for their support: Calvin Williams and Jacob Block, Jeff Giles and Andrew Grossman. Thank you very much. I hope all of you stay well, stay safe, and healthy. Until next time.